So we're still talking about the state of the economy, and of course energy plays a very large role, a very key role in how the economy looks and how it's shaped. So we've had a lot of conversations looking at how 2016 was, reviewing 2016 for the economy and outlooks for 2017. Now, a number of investment firms, financial analysts have talked about this, talked about the outlook for 2017. Now, the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, a think tank, actually had a session and talked about 2016 and gave an outlook for 2017. But most importantly, how can Nigeria thread the path to economic recovery and growth, and can it be sustainable in 2017? Well, Wilson Erumebor, a research analyst with Nigeria Economic Summit Group, joins me to talk about some of this. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Harris.
So let's start first of all, looking inwards. That's what the topic is for the 2017 outlook from the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. Would you say that if we look inwards, Nigeria will thread the path of economic recovery and growth in 2017?
Well, absolutely. That's basically what we believe, and that's actually what informed our macroeconomic outlook for the year. Just a little bit review about how 2016 went. I mean, it was really a tough year for Nigerians. I mean, virtually all the key economic indicators were actually not friendly. I mean, you look at GDP, we had, by estimation, we're going to have 1.66 negative growth. Inflation, of course, ended the year at 18.5%. Unemployment on the rise at 14%. You look at the balance of payment deficit, we're already at minus 824 billion naira as at the third quarter of 2016. So for us, what led us to this situation? Many people would agree that the GDP started declining in 2014 when crude oil price kept going down. But more importantly, we thought that the reason why we actually went down to this point of huge negative growth was because two major reasons. First, our inability to respond on time. We had a lot of delays during the year, the budget, and a whole lot of other issues, appointment of cabinet members. And then more importantly, we thought that the productive sectors of Nigeria, of the Nigerian economy, is very weak. And for us to actually, get on the path of growth that is actually sustainable, with emphasis to sustainable, we felt that we need to correct some imbalances in the economy. For instance, you look at imports. Why is it that we had imports merely declined by 5% as at September 2015? Rather, exports. Exports is basically selling goods to earn foreign exchange. Foreign exchange, of course, is earned. We can't actually produce dollar in Nigeria. Exports, on the other hand, declined by about 42%. So where do we get? You saw the foreign exchange crisis that we are in. So our view is that for us to actually get on the path of sustainable growth, we need to look inward on key sectors, and we need to strengthen our productive base of the economy. We believe that there is no growth. You can't have sustainable growth without strengthening some particular key sectors, particularly the value addition sectors. Recession became a buzzword in 2016, and obviously you can actually get out of a recession and go back into it. If you look at what has been driving growth in the past, it's not difficult to say that. Look at the past decade before 2016, for instance. We had a situation where we're growing at 7.7% on the average, and so many people weren't really feeling as much impact of that growth. So what I think Nigerians Nigeria as a country should be looking at is correcting the structural deficiencies that are very important, and in the end would lead us to the path of inclusive growth that is sustainable in the long run. Well, that's basically what our report highlights.
Correcting the structural deficiency would also mean that we have to have the reforms in place to make sure that this is achieved. So what kind of reforms do you want to see?
First of all, we thought that it's very important for us to have a stable macroeconomic environment. if that doesn't happen, I'm not sure how much progress we can make, both on the fiscal and monetary policy side. We've seen how exchange rate has been a major issue for either the manufacturers, for even citizens that had to meet certain dollar bills. So ensuring stability in the exchange rate market, clarity of policies, rather than leasing out ad hoc interventions that really causes a lot of uncertainties for either the investor or even citizens in the country. We feel that needs to be addressed in terms of stability in the rates. Secondly, on the fiscal side, the budget, I must emphasize that this is really a huge critical issue that needs to be addressed if at all we're going to achieve growth that is reasonable. Implementation of the budget over the years, we've seen how, if you look at past data for maybe 5, 6, 7 years before now, you'd notice that the recurrent aspect of the budget usually gets over implemented than the capital aspect, which I believe is actually more important for.
But then you have to pay salaries. So
yes, of course you need to, but how many people, look at the size of government, for instance, how many people compare the impact of you having massive infrastructure that actually delivers or reaches to the large population, to the majority. That actually is really very critical for your industries to survive, for you to have linkages between sectors. It's very important for you to strengthen the infrastructure base of the country. And I think a lot of reforms need to go into that process. The fact that we keep passing the budget. The budget was just presented in December 2016. You look at countries like, say, Singapore, for instance, 9 months into the budget year, the processes has actually begun to pass the budget. You look at the United States, one of the examples we had was, I think in 2014 when they had a shutdown. That was basically because the country has a policy that once the financial year begins and you've not actually approved your budget, there is no way the government can run. So that tells you, it sends a message of how the system, actually promotes fiscal spending, and that's really very key for us.
Well, Wilson, if you were to guess, for instance, the 2017 budget is 7.3 trillion naira, and the National Assembly has reviewed benchmark for oil from 42.50 to 44.50. That's up by $2. But if you were to guess, how much would you say is actually needed to start to grow the economy?
Well, your question is a bit, because you can't really pinpoint a particular. Look at, for instance, Nigeria's infrastructure deficit. There are estimates that you have over the $30 billion. Some would argue, different estimates. So I think what we need right now is how we can stimulate certain activities across different sectors. And for us, if you look at our outlook, for instance, we pointed out 2 key sectors that are very, very crucial to determine whether or not how much sustainable growth we would achieve in the long term. So putting out a figure, I'm not quite sure if that would act, but what we emphasize is the fact that we need to have targeted infrastructure projects that can stimulate industrial development in Nigeria. One of the sectors we talked about is agro-processing and manufacturing. We noticed that there's no way we can achieve growth that is sustainable if we keep importing things that we can produce. You look at the numbers. I think that was in 2015, we imported about 159 million toothbrushes from China. That's something I feel it should be a source of worry for Nigerians. Why do we spend 800 billion, for instance, importing vegetables, tobacco, live animals?
It's particularly worrisome on that on the toothbrush part. Why wouldn't everybody just look at locally? But then you see again, it puts pressure on the trees. For those who understand, coming from the villages, using chewing stick, the bamboo, the chewing stick and the rest of it. But on a much more serious note, do you think that capacity, yes, there's some companies that have the capacity, but are not competitive enough to play on a global space, which is the reason why we continue to see an increase in importation of this particular materials. And of course, you listened to Bolanle just a few minutes ago. Yeah. She talked about how there's an increase of importation of raw materials for these companies. And so it will continue to happen in 2017 if nothing is really done.
Yes, I agree with you that, to a large extent, the issue of capacity, quality, standards, I mean, it's really, worrisome for Nigeria. But I'd say that, I mean, as a country, whatever situation we find ourselves, there's always a solution to every problem. We can't keep, hanging on the fact that we don't have capacity, there are some products that you see around Nigeria that has tremendously improved, and Nigeria is actually leading. I mean, look at, I'll give you an example of Nigerian cables, for instance. I mean, you call a rewire or an electrician, for instance, and they tell you, don't make sure you buy XYZ cable from the market produced by Nigeria. I mean, where did we start from, and how did we get to that point where, it's not totally bad across all the sectors. There are issues success stories that we can actually learn from as a country. You look at, let's say, for instance, cement. Nigeria used to be one of the largest importer of cement within the region of West Africa. But over time, we've seen how the commitment of government, although there are issues with the pricing and all that, but we've seen how commitment to, ensuring we shift from import dependence to production in that sector. And I think there is, for me, looking at the economy and the fact that we import so much of all these foreign goods, it's a good signal that demand actually exists locally. What we should be concentrating on is how can we replace those, reduce the import, because the demand is constant. It's there locally, but how can we feed that demand with local production rather than import? So, yes, capacity is an issue, and I think the government actually has a very huge and important role to play in terms of the regulatory agencies enforcing standards and ensuring that whatever comes out of Nigeria meets, because the world now is a global village, and you can't expect to remain a local champion, and which is one of the reasons why I think our current foreign exchange situation also presents. If Nigeria was actually serious about getting a weaker currency, is actually an incentive to export to other countries, because exporters, you have so much to gain. But again, you see a lot of bottleneck, and it's really sometimes talking about Nigerian issues but I feel we need to demonstrate so much of commitment to say, let's do this, and we can actually achieve it if we want to.
Wilson Erumebor, research analyst with Nigeria Economic Summit Group. Thank you so much for coming on the program today and sharing your perspectives with us.
Yeah.